Well, Naomi,
Well, Aaron.
I think it's time to start the show.
Oh my goodness.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sweater Weather, a podcast about Canadian arts and culture. I'm Aaron Giovanone, a writer in Calgary, Alberta.
And I'm Naomi Lewis, a writer in Calgary, Alberta.
Okay. I don't really like looking at the camera very much.
All right, we'll look at each other.
How do you feel our podcast is going so far overall?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm pretty excited about it, actually. I think that we're actually doing a great job here. It's really fun to go back and think about these examples of Canadian culture that were part of our youth, because we're starting in the 90s, which is when we were...
80s.
Okay, we're starting in the 80s, which is when we were children.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty neat to go back and revisit those things because they were just kind of there in the culture at the time. It was kind of impossible to avoid them. And of course, revisiting them as an adult, they seem very different.
Indeed.
Yes. For many reasons. Partly the evolution of our brains and partly the evolution of the world, mm-hmm. society, and mm-hmm. expectations mm-hmm. and whatnot. So
Danger Bay is a good summertime show, and we are at the height of summer here.
It's very hot.
It's hot in Calgary.
Yes.
And that's why I'm wearing my Hawaiian shirt.
Because we might as well be in Hawaii.
I think we saw a couple of episodes of Danger Bay with people in Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah, no doubt.
We have, since we've kind of rebooted Sweater Weather, we have a few new patrons.
Yes.
It's kind of nice. We should thank them here, especially our kind of our first ones.
Yeah, which is?
One of them is my mother. Margaret Griffiths, longtime supporter of me and my work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the second one to join was my father, David Lewis.
Thanks, David.
Longtime supporter of my work.
That's right.
Yeah.
We have another patron too.
To thank. Yeah.
Friend and downstairs neighbor, Rod. Rod, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rod.
We're always talking to you about the stuff.
He's also a supporter of our work.
He is very much a supporter of our work. We appreciate it very much.
Mm-hmm.
So for everybody else out there who wants to support Sweater Weather, you can do that. Do you know where they can do that, Naomi?
Patreon.
do you know the Patreon address yet?
No.
Patreon.com/Canadian Sweater.
Canadian Sweater.
That's where you can sign up for various levels, tiers and stuff, lots of different things available there. Basically, the major benefit that patrons get is they get the entire episode, right? Because the free version of the show may be 30, 40 minutes long, depending. That's about half. And the full version will be 60 to 80 minutes long.
So this is our third one. And in the first two, there's some pretty great stuff in that second part of the show.
That's right.
I wouldn't want people to miss that.
That's right. Patrons are enjoying the second half of the show. Check out, so if you want to do that, of course, that'll be helping us out, keep the show growing. Which
we would like to do, because we know it's going to get better and better.
We have big plans.
And we'd also really like to hear if people have ideas for episodes, right?
Yeah. We do, yeah. Send us an email, sweaterweatherpod@gmail.com. That's sweaterweatherpod@gmail.com. Yeah, we have big plans, don't we? We have a running Google Doc of about 80 episode topics right now of CanCon.
Yeah.
Of historical or popular importance.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good stuff there.
Can't wait to talk about it.
And we are looking for new ideas too, so if you have suggestions and ideas for the show, feel free to send us a message. On any of our socials. We're on all the social medias, all of them. Mm-hmm. Social media is already plural. I
didn't
all
want
the social, all the social mediums. Mediums.
Whatever.
What are your initial impressions of Danger Bay?
When I first saw it, I was new to Canada.
Okay.
And I didn't really. My family moved to Ottawa when I was 7 in 1983. Mm-hmm. So. I was still pretty new to Canada when the show started. I didn't really know where Vancouver was or anything like that. And I don't think I really registered that it was particularly Canadian. In my brain, I hadn't really distinguished between Canadian and American yet. And
you didn't understand national boundaries quite yet.
No, and I was often kind of like, oh, is this Canadian? Is this not? It was... the fact that Mr. Rogers was American and Mr. Dressup was Canadian, I was just kind of confused by it all. So
Mr. Dressup, future topic of Sweater Weather.
Yes. Vancouver was just as far away as anywhere else. Why am I talking about this? I don't know. Because this time going back, we've been to Vancouver.
Sure.
We've been to the Vancouver Aquarium together.
Which features prominently in the show.
Yeah, which features, I mean, it's set at the Vancouver Aquarium, essentially. That's where he works.
We're there almost every episode.
Yeah, and that's where the main character works.
Yeah.
Dr. Grant Roberts. And some of the animal characters that appear in the show, we've seen their kind, if not them specifically.
Their species.
Their species, their offspring, shall we say.
Maybe their genus.
Progeny.
We had a good time at the Vancouver Aquarium.
Yeah, we did.
The otter exhibit, is that the right word? The otter tank?
The otter...
It seems weird to say exhibit.
Habitat,
that's the word. It was great, very cute.
Loved the otters. And the otters appear like several times throughout the series, so that's great. And then, of course... so one thing that really struck me about the series is this time is that they really want you to come away with they're really advocating for something, which is essentially animal rights and like seeing animals as like sentient beings that deserve consideration. Mm-hmm. And that's really interesting to see on the screen, but it's also like a bit problematic the way they do it in some ways, because sometimes they make stuff up to convince the viewer that the animals are worthy of such consideration.
I feel like this is a show well before the internet, so people couldn't like verify some of the facts they were throwing out there at times. It just seems they wanted to hammer the point home that animals are important.
Yeah, but they don't shy away from just blatantly...
They fictionalize freely.
Yes.
For entertainment's sake.
And then another interesting thing about the animal rights slant is that you often see them eating animals. See, like in one episode that we saw, the characters were very concerned about the well-being of this eel that was accidentally injured, or accidentally on purpose injured, and it was like their friend who was an eel. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And in that same episode, you see them eating a fish.
A salmon.
Yeah. And so I was like, well, why? Like, I'm just curious, why is the eel a person with a name and the salmon is dinner?
Good question.
And in another episode, they're arguing about something to do with, I can't even remember what animal. Oh, I think it's the same one. And you see one of the characters angrily pounding out some meat with a tenderizer because she's so upset about the treatment of an animal.
That's right. Well, that was presumably a cow, a land animal.
Yeah, so
they're just not as cool as the marine animals. That's the lesson of the show. I just have to scratch my head a few times in there where I'm like, well, why? Right. There are, the ethic.
It's not exactly consistent or
that's right.
truthful, but that's okay.
From today's point of view, too, this is a kind of a show that was meant to have an environmentalist message, an animal activist, animal rights message.
Yeah.
That certainly would violate that. Pretty much watching the show, I'm sure no animal rights advocate today would like what they're seeing.
Well, that's the other thing, right? Is that there's animals in every episode, and like those animal actors, like how are they being cajoled into performing, one has to wonder.
Yeah, watching this show, we noticed that, so the formula we'll get into some of the details of Danger Bay's production in a minute. Just maybe off the top here, we'll say there's a formula for a good Danger Bay episode. Mm-hmm. We realized after watching several of them now. The best kind of Danger Bay episode is it has an animal, it features an animal or an environmental issue, but the best ones have an animal, right? Mm-hmm. And then the kids, Dr. Grant, the main character, and his two kids, they have an adventure.
And Jonah.
That's right. Nicole and Jonah, the two kids, and then JL, a pilot, girlfriend, eventual wife of Dr. Grant, is also often in the mix, flying a plane somewhere. So all those people, they have an adventure.
And you forgot one. Dr. Grant's boss, George, at the aquarium.
George, that's his name. That's right.
Yeah, he's often involved in the adventure as well.
Right. So animal plus adventure equals good Danger Bay episode.
Yeah.
Right? But what we noticed is that a lot of the episodes we're watching they feature live wild animal actors. Whether it's an otter or a monkey, like an orangutan, or
wildcat,
a mountain lion. And these are in the 80s the way you might have seen on Johnny Carson when, I don't know, was it Jack Hanna, the famous zoologist, zookeeper, would bring out the animals on display. They would be acting with animals, and actually an interview with the actor who played Dr. Grant, we'll talk about him in a little bit, Donnelly Rhodes, he mentioned how frequently he was bit. He was bit and injured very frequently by the animal, I guess you'd call them actors.
Really?
Yeah, on the show. So that was happening all the time. And so watching it now, we realize, wow, they used a lot of real animals. That's something that, PETA wouldn't like, animal activists wouldn't like today. And that has definitely fallen out of fashion or maybe even practice altogether because, of course, with digital technology, they kind of work in wild animals to movies where they might need them quite often. When you see an animal in a movie now, a live animal, it's a domestic animal usually. It's like a dog. That's a big thing about Danger Bay. It really relies on animals to be interesting, we've noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are other episodes where it's like interpersonal, romantic themes.
Fewer animals, and
they're not...
Not great.
The show doesn't really work. The show really doesn't work without the animals, so...
And like often I found myself wishing for more animal, less human.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You're like, well, I'd rather be looking at a very cute otter right now than watching like, I don't know, JL's like wooden acting as she...
The acting's not good in this show.
Right.
It's fair to say.
Let's not be too hard on it, but...
It's not great.
Right. So
Except for the animal actors.
The animal actors are all great. We love them all. I'm sure they're all still alive and working 40 years later.
Yeah.
So you mentioned already Danger Bay is in Vancouver, and that's another part. Okay, when you see a lot of scenery, like the ocean and the forest or whatever of Vancouver and thereabouts, makes for a great Danger Bay episode too, because that's a really big appeal of the show. When I was a kid in Canada, born and raised, like in southern Ontario, Niagara countryside, seeing this seemed very exotic to me.
Right.
Like it's the ocean.
Yeah, totally.
And so that was like a side of Canada, a coast of Canada, I had no experience of at all. And so it was kind of neat. I think the same appeal that a foreign viewer, a non-Canadian, would be like, wow, Canadian wilderness is beautiful. That was actually kind of how
I was... because Canada's so huge.
Yeah, exactly.
But then also, I feel like they don't quite explain on the show, like, where, like, is Danger Bay is a place, or, like, where is it? And
so Danger Bay,
are they in Vancouver, or is Danger Bay another place?
Yeah, so I think it's that they work in, so it's Vancouver Aquarium, so that's the real place in Vancouver, and they mention Vancouver here and there. But then they also mention that the Grant family, they have a house in some place called Danger Bay. That's fictional. The real danger in the opening sequence of the show, there's like an aerial shot of a fancy house on an island.
Yeah.
It seems like an island or on a little coast or what that place really is I guess someplace called Lone Rock Point.
Okay.
Which is in Vancouver or near Vancouver. So it's Danger Bay is a fictional name for a small town on the outskirts of Vancouver.
Okay, so the idea is that they don't live in Vancouver, but they go there every day to go to the aquarium.
It's within commuting distance for Dr. Grant.
And they probably go there in a boat.
We never see them.
Or a helicopter.
No, actually,
you see him driving his truck.
He's always... Not a truck.
Jeep.
Very much a Jeep. The Jeep is important because it's there all the time. And again, in the opening sequence, there's Dr. Grant driving across a bridge. I'm not sure what bridge it is.
So presumably the bridge from Danger Bay to Vancouver.
That's right, going to work. Got to get to work.
Yeah.
And there's an eel who needs me in the aquarium this morning. Just speeding open air, wind blowing through his hair. This is great. It's great.
Yeah. Can I just mention one very interesting thing about this show is that Dr. Grant goes to work every day at the aquarium, and he appears to bring his two kids with him.
Yes.
Jonah and Nicole. They're always there.
They're always involved.
And they are assigned tasks at the aquarium as though they were employees.
Sort of. I mean, there are volunteers or whatever. I mean, I'm sure there's volunteers who work at the Vancouver Aquarium.
Yeah, but there don't seem to be very many employees because whenever there's something important to do, he sends his kids off to do it.
Well, you see, Dr. Grant, not only is he a great marine biologist, he's also a terrific dad, and he wants to involve his kids in everything he does. Danger Bay, when did it run? We're talking about the 80s, right? So it premiered October 8th, 1984. They produced a total of 123 episodes. That's 6 seasons worth until 1990. Now, it was a co-production of CBC and the Disney Channel.
Okay.
So it broadcast in the United States on the Disney Channel.
Oh, it did?
Yep. So they had a big American audience, and it was the most popular show on the Disney Channel for some of those years.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was also for the CBC the best-selling foreign property. So the CBC sells its shows abroad to other like networks. It ended up being broadcast in 72 other countries. You can see it. You can see the show now, as where we watched it, on the Canadian Media Fund's Encore Plus YouTube channel. So basically, the Canadian Media Fund, I guess, they have the rights to many of the shows and movies that they've funded over the decades at this point. And so they're on, and that includes Danger Bay. And so that's where you can see Danger Bay now in pretty good quality. So that's kind of nice. That's kind of nice. Do you know anything about the Paul Saltzman or Peter Dixon that created the show? Peter Dixon was a television writer. He had worked on Knight Rider, 21 Jump Street. So typical, like kind of big 80s shows in the States. He wrote some episodes of Danger Bay as well. I don't have much more information about Peter Dixon, but Paul Saltzman, he was really the mover and shaker of the two. And so he's born in 1943. He's the son of Percy Saltzman. He's the first, so his dad was the first English language weatherman in Canada. So he was an on-air personality. He also would host news programs on CBC. So he was born into show business, Canadian show business. And Paul Saltzman himself, he's very much like a 60s generation guy. So he was an activist involved in voting rights in Mississippi in 1960, in the early 1960s, mid-1960s. In 1968, he was working for the NFB, the National Film Board, on documentary films. He traveled to India to make a documentary film with a crew. And while there, he fell in with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
Oh, okay.
So very important figure in the counterculture of the time. And so while he was there...
The Beatles hung out with that guy.
Well, Paul took several photographs of the Beatles. Famous photographs. These photos were reprinted in the international press, and they became famous. This was like his big debut, was photographing the Beatles in India.
I feel like I've seen those photos.
You've probably seen them. Today, they've been in shows, museum displays and stuff. Today, they're on permanent display at the Liverpool airport. And then even recently, just a few years ago, he made a documentary film about his time in India and his encounter with the Beatles. And so this 60s experience is like very much an important part of Paul Saltzman's like life and identity.
Okay, and presumably animal rights was part of that.
I think it was a big part of getting the show made, is that you have to have often a social purpose for what you're pitching, especially when government funding's involved, and you're like, well, what are you teaching kids? What are you teaching the populace with this show? So basically, after he came back from India, like in the 70s, he produced and directed a lot of documentaries. He's really well known and respected, I think, as like a producer, a guy who could really find money and make deals. And this was a pretty high budget show, Danger Bay. It cost a lot of money.
Yeah, it must have.
They're flying helicopters around.
Yeah, every episode.
Boats, hovercraft. I mean, there's all kinds of stunts.
There must be tons of stunt performers in there too.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then in 1984, he co-created and co-produced Danger Bay. While he was doing like promotion for the show before its release, he thought Danger Bay was, quote, an antidote to death-filled television where 16 people get killed in an hour. Yep, yeah.
Although there is some death in Danger Bay, as
There's plenty of death.
Couldn't help but notice while you're watching it. There's, surprisingly, you often see dead animals.
They show you dead animals.
Yeah.
They'll show you like a dead whale. I mean, it's a model. It's some sort of model.
Presumably it's not a real dead animal, but it's still distressing.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice. I mean, it's an interesting choice from our point of view today.
Yeah.
In the 80s, I guess there'd be no real problem.
Because we're thinking of it as a kid show, and we're thinking, whoa.
Kids gotta know the grim reality of death.
Apparently. I mean, there was that one episode we watched with the otter mom and baby.
Yep.
Where the otter mother, they know, has a heart condition and doesn't have long to live. And they're worried that the mother will die before the baby is fully weaned. And they're trying to find another lactating otter, and I think there's a pretty funny line where Grant's like, "We need a lactating otter!"
Screaming it to the heavens.
Yeah. And through the whole episode, I was like really scared that at any moment they're gonna show us the mom just like suddenly sink to the bottom of the pool. And basically, we did see
a floating dead otter body.
Yeah,
they like zoomed in on it.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, wow. You can hear the cries of grief of children all across North America in 1986, whenever that was shown.
Oh my goodness. But you know what's funny is I also don't remember as a child having been distressed watching the show.
I don't think I was either.
I mean, the last couple of days we watched a bunch of episodes. We saw a dead sack containing a dead dog in a sack and a bloody sack. We saw
this was episode 2 of the series. They had to put down a dog, a grizzly old sailor had a rabid dog. This is a bizarre story, but anyway, and so it turns out that the sailor briefly lands in Vancouver. His dog gets off the boat and bites Nicole, Dr. Grant's daughter, and then they fear the dog is rabid. It turns out the dog is rabid, but while chasing down the man and his dog on a boat, they get in a helicopter. No, are they in a plane? No, they're in a helicopter.
Both. They have a plane and
There's
a helicopter
boat.
going.
There's a helicopter. There's a hovercraft. And they're like searching all over, like up and down the coastline for a dog.
Yeah. Well, the dog is rabid. It's kind of like it's an emergency.
Yes, the state like activates all functions possible for the safety of the populace in this particular episode. Anyway, and then the old sailor he gets bitten by his rabid dog too, and he's sad.
And he sees the foam.
Yeah, so they cut away. They cut away. It's like a long shot of the boat. Then I hear the gunshot.
Yeah.
And the fisherman has killed the dog. And the next scene he's carrying around a bloody bundle. You can see blood on the sheets that he's wrapped his dog's body, and he puts it down, and this like bloody bundle is in frame like for a whole scene.
Yeah. There's a lot of.
It's wild. Excuse me for laughing. It's just like this.
It's shocking. It is to us, to our
in the 80s
sensibilities. And then there's the poor dead otter mom. Yeah. The poor little otter baby floating there all alone. And then there's also a dead whale. Mm-hmm. Barnacles on its hide and everything. But it's interesting though, he says this is an antidote to violence because like the humans are very kind to each other. That is one thing about the show is the humans are so nice. There's really, even when there appears to be an antagonist who might have a bit of malice or something, it turns out that they meant well, usually.
Usually.
Not always.
Yeah. So, this is more from Paul Saltzman promoting the show. While Doc's actions stem from compassion, this won't be a soft show. The audience will be engrossed because the characters have a real passion for their work. Mm-hmm. That is so true. I mean, this is a show about workaholic professional class people. These are highly moral, highly motivated, and they're goody two-shoes, basically.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Yeah. And it's about Dr. Grant, who's one of these, teaching his kids to be like that as well, I think.
His kids are like saints.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a problem. It's a problem for being interested in the characters because they are all just they're perfect.
But then, like I said, an antagonist will come in, and yeah, they're usually just misguided. Sometimes they're actually evil, have malicious intent. Yeah. But often not. But like even then, the kids are kind of come in as the voice of reason and are able to help these poor misguided people often. When there's someone in trouble or someone who's just kind of been on the wrong path, the kids are often involved in like gently helping them.
We talked about Donnelly Rhodes, who's playing Doc Grant. He's he's on screen so much. I think he got really, really tired of filming the show by the end of it. It's something that I sent him and I came across in interviews with him. So Donnelly Rhodes, he was from Winnipeg. He was born in 1937. His father abandoned his family. His mother was a journalist and a playwright. She was the first woman in Winnipeg to cover the City Hall beat. And so Rhodes got into acting right away. He did a drama school in Winnipeg, and then he went to the National Theatre School in Montreal. And he had a long and eclectic career as a character actor in Hollywood. He had guest appearances on all of the big shows of the 80s and 70s. So he was on Cheers, Murder, She Wrote, Magnum P.I. He would have like one or two episode arcs on those. He moved from LA to Vancouver for Danger Bay, and he ended up remaining there. Donnelly Rhodes got married 6 times in his life.
Really?
He died in 2018 at the age of 81. So
6 times.
He's a handsome man.
Yeah.
He was a handsome man. You see him age a lot during Danger Bay.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think he would have been, say, in his late 40s, at the beginning of Danger Bay, and then, maybe his early 50s by the end of it. But he never stopped working, really, because after Danger Bay, he went almost... Well, it was a few years later, but he ended up on Da Vinci's Inquest, that police procedural.
Yeah.
And that ran from 98 to 2005, and he had a co-starring role on that as a grumpy detective. Did you ever see Da Vinci's Inquest?
Never saw it.
It's going to be a future episode of Sweater Weather. And he was also on the sci-fi series Battlestar Galactica, where he played the smoking doctor. I mean, you're a big Battlestar fan, aren't you?
Yeah.
You know the doctor who smoked all the time? You don't remember, right?
I guess I don't remember.
Oh, well, we're going to have to do Battlestar Galactica too. These are all filmed in Vancouver, all these shows.
Yeah, but there's that kind of Canadian. I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of Canadian actors on it, and it was filmed in Vancouver, and it had Canadian film credits. So it is a good question, like what counts as Canadian.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we don't think of Battlestar Galactica as a Canadian is because it wasn't originally a Canadian story, right?
Right.
It was a movie.
But I mean, like, The X-Files was filmed in Vancouver, too.
That's true.
We don't think of that as Canadian.
Yeah, I guess it depends. Yeah, I mean, there's a formula. Mm-hmm. There's a formula that I don't know, Telefilm or Canadian Media Fund follow to determine if something counts as Canadian or how Canadian is it, and then that's how much money they can get.
But I mean, is it set in Canada? I think is a good question.
That's one of the criteria. Yeah.
Yeah, because like Danger Bay really has a Canadian vibe. Even the goodiness of it, it's kind of Canadian in flavor.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Dr. Grant's daughter, Nicole Grant, is played by Ocean Hellman. Her full name, you ready for this? Is Crystal Ocean Supri Heavenly Blue Sky Hellman.
Oh my goodness.
She's from Victoria. She is no longer an actress. Okay. The son is played by Christopher Crabb. All right. So
there's an ocean and
an ocean and a crab on this show that's all about the sea.
Interesting.
I feel like there was unconscious bias on the part of casting directors when they're like reading the names, like, whoa, this person's meant for the role.
Although like Ocean Hellman had so many other names, like maybe she just picked Ocean because the show.
It's a good technique if you want. It's good to have a lot of names.
Yeah.
Then you can choose to highlight the one that's the best in the situation you're in.
Yeah, like if she was going to be on a show about birds, she could have picked Blue Sky.
That's right. So Christopher Crabb was born in Toronto. His father was an American opera singer who performed at the Stratford Festival. He stayed in Canada and then would perform, and then I guess as a vaudevillian actor in the Muskoka cottage country.
Oh, neat.
Christopher Crabb, something interesting about him too, is he was a semi-professional tennis player. His highest achievement was that he once defeated the number 300, the 300th player.
300th ranked player?
In the world.
Wow.
He beat him once. Crabb lives in Hollywood and acts still. At different times, he's tried to lead a reboot of Danger Bay.
Oh, and what
to no
happened?
end.
It didn't work.
Well, it wouldn't work today. As we said.
because they kidnap animals.
Well, you can't. It just seems like that formula would not work. The formula for the best Danger Bay show, like we mentioned, with the live animals, wouldn't work today. It just wouldn't.
I wonder how. Yeah, I guess it's just not going to happen.
That's right.
Alas.
Now, dun 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 dun.
Dun 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 dun.
The Danger Bay theme song is a real earworm.
Sure is.
So patron neighbor Rod mentioned in an online comment that it was unforgettable and that he actually had his own, for time, Canadian history podcast. And it was their theme song. They used it.
What?
Yeah. In 2011, Canadian rapper Classified wrote a song called Danger Bay that doesn't just sample the theme song, but is actually like a remix of the theme
Really?
song. The whole song is like the Danger Bay theme in the background, but remixed. Yeah.
Can we listen to it?
You want to listen to it now?
Yeah.
All right. Our audience won't be able to listen to it for copyright reasons, but we can listen to it. All right.
Oh. That was great.
Welcome to Danger Bay. I mean,
that was his version of Danger Bay that he was describing was a much darker place than Danger Bay.
Yes, he lists the ills of society.
Yeah.
How materialistic we are, how superficial, later on in the song there's like samples of like Hurricane Katrina, like news announcements and or 9/11. So it's just like, I guess you'd call it Jeremiah against modern society in a way. Yeah. So.
Well, interesting. That's not what Danger Bay is about, but that's okay.
I don't think he mentions animals even once.
I mean, it's like the opposite message. Well, on the show, the message is all about love and like hope and all bonding together as humans and animals.
That's right.
Danger Bay is a place of love and benevolence.
All right, so there's other episodes here. So that's right. Like friend and commenter online, Kathleen. Mm-hmm. She mentioned remembering an episode called Katie and the Whale. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Season 1, episode 6.
Thanks for the comment, Kathleen.
Yeah.
Katie is this traumatized young girl who, due to tragedy in her family, has selective mutism, which means she doesn't talk.
That's right.
And she bonds with a whale at the aquarium, thanks to Nicole, like befriending her for purely altruistic reasons, and hanging out with her like every day, taking her to the whale show every day, and this girl bonds so thoroughly with the whale that when the whale becomes depressed and no one can figure it out, the girl not only speaks her first words since the family tragedy, but knows intuitively what's wrong with the whale. And it's said that she knows how the whale feels. So she has established a telepathic connection.
An empathic
connection with the whale. So, I mean, interesting theory. And that this was made at a time when whales were very much
whales are a big
trending.
Part. Yes, they're a big part of 80s environmentalism. Mm-hmm. Save the whales. This episode is broadcast, I believe, the same year as Star Trek 4.
In which also there's a psychic bond with a whale.
That's right.
Yeah, between Spock and the whale. Although, to be fair, that makes more sense because he does a mind meld.
He does a mind meld. Very famous scene, but it's
yeah. And I mean, it's certainly plausible that whales have, communicate with each other.
Well, they certainly do, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly
I think that was
possible.
kind of newly understood at the time, which is why it became a big deal. Like, oh, wow, whales can talk.
Right, so they have some kind of sentience. They're people in a way.
Yeah.
And so the idea that a whale and a human could form a bond is like really compelling.
Mm-hmm. There's a brief conversation between Doc and his daughter Nicole about their grief about having lost Nicole's mother and Doc's wife.
Yeah.
Which I guess we didn't mention that Doc he's a single father. He's a widower. His wife has died before the show started. So there's like nice emotional moments like that. They don't explain how the girl understands the whale. It just kind of, to be honest, anybody watching the episode would know exactly why the whale is sad because
it's obvious.
It's obvious.
It is obvious.
Because the whale's normal trainer has gone out of town.
And
so you're like, okay, she misses the trainer. So
you're right. Maybe it's just obvious and the girl is like picks up on it because she's intuitive. Like it's because it's not hard to figure it out. You're right.
I don't know.
But I just feel like that's the kind of thing that in the 80s was really on point, and I, as a child in the 80s, remember loving that kind of thing. Like that would have really touched my heart at the time, the idea that a human child could have a psychic connection with a whale that like could heal her trauma and the whale's trauma at the same time. And with all that whale stuff, like I remember having that kind of fantasy of having a telepathic connection with a whale.
You do?
And yeah.
Okay.
Like
you
that
never
was
told
just,
me that before. I wish I knew this about you before.
That was just kind of in the zeitgeist.
Yeah. Well, from Star Trek 4, would you have watched that as a kid?
I'm sure I saw it. I'm sure I saw that episode of Danger Bay.
Right.
And like the whole idea of like having a special, like such a deep intuitive sense that one could communicate with animals.
Yeah.
I mean, in a lot of children's books, like children who are like special somehow can communicate with animals.
Right. That's right.
And so
Yeah.
it's like
It's playing on a trope of children's literature.
and like and a fantasy, like a really deep fantasy that like animals, like if you could figure out how to listen right, you could know what they were thinking.
And it's doing that. And this episode is trying to fulfill that childhood fantasy that through, but while staying in realism, staying realistic, explaining, whales are, they're they communicate, and they're complicated and complex emotional beings, just like people are.
I mean, and then there's also the irony that no one questions whether the whale should be in captivity, of course.
Yeah, that doesn't come up at all. That would really undermine the basis of the show. I mean, basically, the Vancouver Aquarium, I'm sure for many years, ran on the money that killer whale shows basically generated, right? One of their many ways to make money. So
I wonder how much business they got because of the show Danger Bay. Like that, what a great advertising.
Yeah, so actually, so during the run of Danger Bay, it was I believe it was 1985. I have it in my notes somewhere. It was in 85 or 86 that there was a mass poisoning sabotage at the Vancouver Aquarium. This was in the midst of the show's run. So it killed hundreds of fish. And that were, maybe, I think it was, the number quoted was, this was $80,000 worth of fish that were killed. And this was a big media event. Vancouver Aquarium did a fundraiser, and they made, I think, $200,000, so they were more than able to replace the dead fish. So that was some kind of act of sabotage. Who would have been doing it? Could it have been like kind of a extremist or something who objected to any animals being in the Vancouver Aquarium? It's hard to say. It was an unsolved case. No one ever figured out who that was. So, well, you're asking me if it was good publicity.
Yeah.
For the aquarium.
Totally.
Maybe the show's making the aquarium so high profile also gave some bad publicity.
Oh yeah, okay.
In the sense, I never encountered, this is totally theorizing on my part, but I'm like, that happened right like a year or two after the show began, so it would have been extra consciousness of the aquarium and maybe extra critique of it as well.
Maybe.
Yeah. Season 2, episode 5 is there's an episode featuring an orangutan. It's called A Place for Ponga. The animal actor's real name was Strawberry, as we saw in the credits. But Ponga, the orangutan, has to stay at the aquarium. Normally lives at the zoo, but her habitat is being remodeled. And so she has to stay somewhere else in the meantime.
And while she's there, may I say, she bonds tightly with George, who runs the aquarium.
Yeah, the manager of the aquarium. He's an older man. Maybe he's got a beard. I don't know if this episode he has a beard at some point in the show's run.
I think it's before he grew the beard, but I'm not positive. But they become so tightly bonded that she rides around on his back. And he just like wanders around the aquarium with her on his back, like throughout the exhibits and stuff. And
that's right.
The other guests seem unperturbed by
a man walking around with an orangutan on his back. Yeah. The drama in this episode comes from the storyline is that Ponga seems disturbed.
Upset.
Very
upset.
Occasionally freaks out.
Yeah.
Just will bends her cage's bars. Gee, I wonder why that might be. Anyway, the show's not saying...
She runs around.
The show's not telling us that, she doesn't like being in
no, there must be something else.
There's something else going on. Another point, she, freaks out, tries to bangs on a door or something. So that's kind of the plot. Is like we have to figure out why Ponga is upset. Yeah.
And there's also another, kind of like the whale, there's another like 80s zeitgeisty thing. Like it was in the 80s that certain primates were being taught sign language, right?
Yeah, right.
And so they talk about that several times and how like orangutans have never been taught sign language, but like they kind of say, if only they could talk to her and know what she was saying, then they could understand what was wrong. So definitely implying that it would be possible to communicate if this wall between species could somehow be surmounted. So kind of like the whale thing again, where it's this longing to communicate with another
Ponga
sentient creature.
Yeah, there's a few asides about like, wow, gorillas have learned so many words.
Yeah.
Can communicate this way with sign language. So there's a lot of animal acting in this episode. Ponga does facial expressions, makes noises, is very highly trained animal.
And she seems to know English, like she follows commands.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And she plays soccer.
She plays soccer. I mean, there are jokes about Ponga like being kind of in love
with George.
With George, and you're like, so there's jokes about like Ponga grabbing Dr. Grant's behind while he's examining her.
Slaps his
and
butt,
she shows her teeth, and he's like, okay, show me your tongue, and she goes, like that. So it's like it's a comedy routine that they've choreographed.
Yeah, and he says, okay, lie down, and she like goes splat.
That's right.
I mean, it is cute.
It's a very cute animal. It's a very cute animal to watch. What we have to do, so Ponga doesn't do sign language, but Ponga draws a picture.
Right.
So it's a very, no offense, Ponga, you suck at art.
No, come on, it's not that bad.
It was just a scribble, colorful scribbles in weird shapes, and you can't really tell what it is. Mm-hmm. But they have this picture, and there's like a close up on the paper, and it's like, gee, I wonder what Ponga's trying to tell us.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, they have to do like a critical analysis of Ponga's art to like access her psyche, her thoughts.
Yeah, so Coco the gorilla, probably an influence, almost certainly an influence. She was a gorilla who was taught quite a few words of sign language, and like a lot. She supposedly was able to communicate really quite complex ways, although that's later been questioned by some researchers, like how much of it was perhaps projected onto her, or was like selective in which signs they chose to pay attention to and which they didn't, and that kind of thing.
Right.
But she did have a longing for a baby.
Yeah.
That she communicated, but she was unable to find a mate that she vibed with.
Yeah.
And because of that, she never had a baby. And so she got this kitten instead that she named All Ball.
What?
Famously, she named the kitten All Ball.
All Ball.
All Ball, because it's a ball.
It was a ball.
Yeah.
Ball shaped.
And she loved the kitten.
Wow.
And she was featured on the cover of National Geographic with the kitten and stuff.
That's right.
But I mean, there was also, I think there was some kind of tragedy where at least that kitten or another kitten was hit by a car.
Was accidentally eaten by a gorilla?
No, it was hit by a car, and she was devastated. And she got a new kitten.
Oh.
And then, throughout her life, she had several cats, because, gorillas live much longer than cats.
Coco recently died. It wasn't that long ago, 2018.
Yeah, so she always had a pet cat.
Age of 46. So this is very Coco-inspired.
Yeah, I think so.
Storyline.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was also another chimp called Nim Chimpsky, after Noam Chomsky.
Is that right?
Yeah, who learned some sign language.
That's quite an honor. That must have been one of the greatest honors of...
Well, it was kind of an insult because it was trying to disprove his theories about language acquisition and the human brain and how only
humans knew language.
Yeah.
Only humans.
Okay. And so I guess anyway, no point getting into it, but the debate later was whether or not they were actually using language in a human way, in the kind of way that Chomsky describes, which would have to involve using grammar and stuff like that.
Right.
Which they didn't seem to. It was more like they knew a few nouns, they knew they could attach signifiers to
objects.
Yeah.
But having a grammar with verbs and movement and tenses.
Yeah.
It's a different thing.
Very different.
Right. Maybe we'll talk about another episode. We're getting a little bit later in the series. Season 4, episode 15. It's High Flyer. This is from 1987. Nicole, the daughter, is training to become a pilot. Mm-hmm. Nicole is in love with another pilot.
I think that's going a bit far in love.
Nicole is infatuated with another pilot named Rick Corelli.
Oh, yeah.
Who works for JL's... Hot Stuff. Italian name, who works for JL's charter airline company. Mm-hmm. So JL also a pilot. So this is how Nicole's getting into the piloting industry, which is what it's called, I'm sure. This is 1987. It's a year after Top Gun. So Top Gun is clearly an influence on this episode because Nick Corelli has the iconic big aviators on.
Yeah,
and
he's a maverick.
He's a handsome, cool dude, and he's a maverick. But in the world of Danger Bay, you can't really be a maverick.
No, you can't.
Not in the rules-based order that Danger Bay sets out for us.
Well, he's breaking some rules, but it does not go well.
There's 80s smooth jazz as Nicole and Rick fly together.
Yeah.
It's a really classic, like, 80s.
Doing stunts.
They do barrel rolls and stuff. It's very much like, ooh, this is kind
dangerous.
Yes, it's dangerous. It's akin to sex with a plane. Okay, so now, but there is an outbreak of an avian disease, pneumoencephalitis, at a poultry farm.
The chickens are sick.
Dr. Grant goes to this poultry farm, meets the farmer. Do you want to say something about the farmer?
The farmer is George's ex from long ago.
Right. It's not that important.
But also, she has the worst haircut ever seen on a human being.
It's really strange. You know how I explain it is that this actress is like a nice looking professional class actress, and she shows up and they go, okay, how do we make this person look like a farmer? And so what they do is just basically give her terrible hair.
A mullet.
They give her a mullet, I guess.
There's a mullet with a braid in the back. So like the short part on top is curly and it's like kind of sticking up, and then the back part isn't tied back. So.
Yeah, it's not a convincing
But I don't know,
farmer.
Aaron, because like I don't know if you're right about that, because a lot of people in the show have that haircut. It's just that it looks particularly bad on her, and it's badly executed. But like a lot of the women on the show have a curly mullet, and some of the men.
Donnelly Rhodes complained about the hair on the show. He complained about what they did with his own hair. He was going gray. He had gray hair. Mm-hmm. Every week they would dye. Every time they were recording, they would like dye his hair
brown.
But he said that they never got it right. It was always different.
It was always a different color.
It was always you noticed that. You noticed that.
Yes.
He pointed that out years ago. The latest interview with Donnelly Rhodes I could find was 2015 Danger Bay reunion segment on Entertainment Tonight Canada, and he's there with Nicole and Jonah, those actors, and he's just like memories of Danger Bay, and one of the things he points out is how bad his hair was.
Okay.
And how it was always a different color.
But can I just say, like, I just want to emphasize that every single actor in the show has bad hair. Like, sometimes it's shockingly bad, and I think of the episodes we saw, I
can't comment on this. I'm not allowed to.
Because you don't have hair.
What can I say?
Well, Aaron.
I'm a bald man. I never even think to worry about being bald until like I listen to all these other podcasts where they have advertisements for like hair loss drugs and
stuff. You look amazing.
Well, I don't need. Thank you very much. That's what I used to say. But it's funny on Sweater Weather. Never gonna have advertisements like that. Not if we ever. I mean, we're never gonna have an advertisement for a hair loss drug.
Oh, I see.
For men.
Yeah, no.
That's very presumptuous of us to think that we'll ever have advertisers at all. But
we do have 3 subscribers.
We have 3 subscribers
and
right now.
And one of them might want to grow some hair.
This is funny. I mean, this is just like the most basic critique of media or advertising. But it's like I never thought I had a problem until advertising told me.
Oh God, there's so many things like that.
Yeah.
Of course, obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I never thought that my teeth weren't white enough or whatever. Like you just don't notice, and you're like, wait, no, that's the thing.
Yeah, right. That's so true. It's so true. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get back to the.
You don't want to talk about the hair anymore.
Oh, no. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that every single person on the show has bad hair.
Let's not be too rough on them. I mean, it's the 80s. It's the 80s, so there was hair of the 80s.
It was hair of the 80s, but it was...
Not every single one. I mean, there's some nice, just big curly 80s curls.
Yeah, it's true.
That's a good
look. It looks
look.
good on some people.
That's a good look.
You're right. There's a few characters where it's just a big curly thing and it looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And Grant's hair is fine except that it keeps changing color.
Yeah, it's just inconsistent.
Yes.
So it turns out that the disease, the avian disease on the farm, came from the farmer's son's pet parrot. Mm-hmm. It's like a yellow-green parrot. It looks like I think that breed of parrot is called a cake. Mm-hmm. And so it turns out, and then they realize, they got this parrot at this store, and then they make a connection. Oh, that store is known for having contraband smuggled parrots.
Right.
They've done it before, and they've been caught. So that's the source of the avian disease.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Because the parrots didn't go through quarantine like they were supposed to.
the parrot, right, didn't break the rules. There was some, I mean, we watched, rewatched, I don't know, I saw 25 episodes of this preparing for this. There were 3 times where quarantine rules about exotic animals were like, that was the central plot.
Oh, we saw 2 together. There's another one with a little monkey. Yeah.
They mentioned, like, there's like an official from Agriculture Canada or like Border Patrol, like very frequently in the show. As a character. They just show maybe briefly they show up to be like,
and they're like, these are the consequences of not going through quarantine.
That's right. So,
but I mean, fair enough, because like
the rules are important. Who doesn't obey the rules? The bird smugglers. So there are bird smugglers in this episode. We see them. They're like a cretinous couple. They're dressed frumpily. They drive an old pickup truck.
But Aaron, this isn't just about following the rules. This is about the fact that bird smuggling is a thing, and it does bring in avian diseases. And it's wrong because
every time we see a bird,
for multiple reasons.
I think if you watch the show, you would assume that every single bird that came in had a disease, is what kind of sense you might get. There was a monkey in another episode, a monkey that was smuggled in had hepatitis B. Whenever someone does something illegal, there's really bad consequences for doing this illegal thing.
Okay.
It's true, yes. The rules are there for a reason.
I mean, are you like pro smuggling?
That's right. I'm pro bird smuggling. That's right.
You know
I'm pro whale smuggling. I'm pro shark smuggling. I'm pro bear smuggling.
Okay.
I say I'm a libertarian when it comes to animal smuggling.
Okay, but you know what else? It's also,
open borders for gorillas.
But it's also awful to smuggle parrots because of the poor parrots. They are kidnapped from their natural habitat, and
yes, of course I'm joking. This is not a good thing. My point is,
they're mistreated, and often people adopt them and then don't want them anymore.
If you break the rules, there are always, every time, terrible negative consequences. That's what this story...
In life.
That's what this...
In the show.
And that's not what life is like at all.
Well,
it's all I'm saying.
Obviously, they're not showing the times when people break rules with no consequences.
Right. Well, that's not the world of Danger Bay. So
Danger Bay is really not that dangerous.
That's a really good point. It's not really. I mean, there's rules.
I mean, that's what I meant when I said it's the opposite of that song. Like, this is a place where law and order are of the utmost importance.
They're established. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. So we see the bird smugglers. As I said, they're a cretinous couple. Now, one more thing. Hunky pilot, Rick Corelli, guess what? The maverick, the guy who flies by the seat of his pants. Yeah. Guess what? He's a bird smuggler, too. He's on the other...
The main bird
he's part of... Well, he's not the main one. This is the cretinous couple. Are like the ones who
they're the ones who
they make most of the money, they organize it, but they hire Rick to fly birds in and out, so they get to
in and out of where though, like is he flying them across the border?
No, not really. It's like I know, right? I don't know, maybe it's not clear. It's just because it's all happening in Canada as far as I can
right
go.
So he's not okay, so he's there. Okay, so they have acquired the birds from somewhere,
and now they're using him to transport them elsewhere. But it doesn't make sense because I don't think he's taking them. The birds are in Canada. I don't think he's following them across the border. Yeah, that's
right. He couldn't.
You're right. It doesn't really make. We found a plot hole at Danger Bay. Wow, the 40-year-old episode of the show. Okay, so
Rick Corelli is heavily involved.
He's heavily involved. So the climax occurs when Rick, the pilot, brings Nicole to pick up some smuggled birds where the smuggler couple are there.
He tries to pretend it's like something else.
He's trying to just not to play it down. He's like fooled Nicole. Nicole doesn't know what's happening. Now, while the exchange of the birds for the money is happening, Nicole does figure out what's happening, what's going on. And then the smugglers essentially decide they're going to murder her. Jeez, you're like, what? What? You're going to murder someone for this?
Well, they don't want to go to jail.
Anyway, there's a struggle.
Yeah.
And then this is Rick's time to like really decide, what kind of a person are you? Are you the kind who's going to be friends with the dirty smugglers, or are you going to like protect Nicole, your crush? So Rick intervenes. He's a big tough guy, so he fights the smugglers while Nicole jumps in the plane, starts it up, and rolls away, about to take off. And Rick is real tough. He gets hit in the head with a 2x4. protecting her. But he's able to stumble up and like chase down the plane and jump in, and they fly off together.
But somehow he runs as fast as the plane is moving. So she's like driving the plane
real slowly. He is in first gear.
And then, but she's getting away, and then he starts running, and the two other ones are running behind him. And somehow he catches up with the plane and gets in, and the other two are left in the dust.
That's right. They get away.
So interesting.
Eventually they are caught. Basically, JL flying a helicopter with Dr. Grant.
Yeah.
Arrives on the scene. The smugglers jump in a pickup truck, and there's like a high-speed chase with the helicopter behind the pickup truck, and it's flying really low behind the pickup truck.
They don't call the police or anything.
They run it off. Hey, no time.
Right.
I mean, the police are called.
It's a citizen's arrest.
Essentially. Yeah. And they run these people off of the road.
Yeah.
And this happens several times in the show where you're like, I don't think it's worth it, Dr. Grant. Like threatening your life and theirs, like is not really, because there's a bird smuggling operation. Like, I think you've busted it up.
They're doing it for the chickens.
I know. There's another one where there's actually the very first episode of the show.
Yeah.
It's a similar situation where there's fishermen fishing out of season. Okay. They call them poachers, and then there's a high-speed chase where they're like Dr. Grant and his boat is chasing the fisherman's boat, and because there's a high-speed chase, the son Jonah is in a little boat, like out, and he almost gets run over by the fishing boat trying to escape. Holy moly! And you're like, it's like one of those situations where it's like, the cops cause more damage because they're chasing someone than the supposed crime. It was like one of those moments, but the show's not aware of that at all. So it's like
the kids are almost killed all the time.
All the time, but it's like often in enforcing, like you're enforcing the fishing season.
Yeah,
like that's what this is like.
Yeah.
Like the stakes, like it doesn't seem like equal. The stakes don't seem equal to the treatment.
Like it's not worth risking.
You risked your own son's life.
Yeah, he's always
trying to chase down some fishermen who were just fishing some salmon out of season. Not that they should be doing that.
And then meanwhile, the criminals, smugglers or whatever, are like willing to kill a kid.
That's right.
Yeah.
Same, exactly.
Yeah.
So we've described a couple of episodes here. I think we're probably. Is there anything else from another episode that you might want to bring up?
Well, I did want to go back for a second to the one with Jennifer the eel.
It's an episode. It's a kind of a late season episode, so the kids are older. They're like older teens.
Yeah,
and Jonah's friend in this episode is played by Jason Priestley. Yeah. He's handsome. He's a handsome.
Described as a hunk.
Hunky, yes. Nicole. Well, the dad.
The dad.
The dad notices that Nicole is giving him googly eyes, basically, and goes, "Oh, he's quite a hunk."
Can I tell about the episode?
Please do. Yeah.
Well, so Jennifer the eel is a friendly eel, and when the Roberts family go scuba diving, they snuggle and caress Jennifer the eel. She's like, and they feed her, like they're buds.
Yeah.
And she's a tiger eel.
Yeah.
Which they point out is not actually an eel, but a kind of fish.
Wolf eel.
It's
called a wolf eel.
Wolf eel.
Yeah, so it's like a really. It is eel looking,
Looks
and
like
it's fat. It looks fat. It has a big mouth and a big throat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then later in the episode, Jonah goes diving with his friend Derek, played by Jason Priestley, who is not allowed to scuba dive according to his father because his brother was killed in a scuba diving accident. And Derek misguidedly brings a spear gun scuba diving.
Right. Don't you bring a spear gun every time you go swimming?
Yes.
We're going to be at the cottage.
Disapproves. Jonah's like, you're not bringing that thing. But then he brings it anyway. When Jonah sees that he has it, he takes it away. And he's like, we're going back up to the surface. We don't do violence here. We don't carry spear guns.
We don't use spear guns.
Then as he's swimming away with the spear gun, Jennifer appears. Derek grabs the spear gun and for no reason whatsoever shoots Jennifer.
Yes. He's like afraid, I guess.
Yeah, but Jennifer's just sitting there.
Okay, so they make a model of a fake wolf eel, and then they lay it at the bottom. They lay it at the bottom of the bay.
Yeah.
And they just show a spear going into it
and blood
coming out.
You're like, oh, and they do a hit and run. They leave Jennifer. They don't say anything to anyone.
Yeah.
Then later, Nicole goes diving, finds Jennifer.
Finds Jennifer the eel with a spear in her side.
But she's still okay.
And there's like a pietà vision where like she's like holding the eel.
Yeah.
And like, oh, Jennifer.
And then she's like, Dad! 'Cause he's down there too, and they
Right.
can hear each other
That's right.
through the radio. And she's like, Dad, Jennifer's been shot!
Sorry, it's not nice. It's not nice. We don't advocate shooting wolf eels with spear guns.
So there's like several really great lines where the actor has to like yell at the line, and one of them is, Dad, Jennifer's been shot, and there was also, I need a lactating otter.
Yeah, things like
and
that.
then there was also one where JL...
That otter's papers are perfectly in order, damn it.
And there's one where JL was upset with Grant, but she comes through to help with the otter situation, and she's like, I'm doing this for the pup!
Okay,
So-
we're jumbling episodes.
I know,
but like,
but I just wanted to point out that this was one of the great lines of the show. Jennifer's brought back up to the aquarium and treated...
Jennifer is a wolf eel.
Jennifer is treated for her wounds and operated on and then put in a tank
Mhm.
with antibiotics in it.
Mm-hmm. I think she'll make it.
And
After a 28...
she has a 50-50 chance.
After a 28-hour surgery that cost the Canadian government $300,000.
Okay, no, you just made that up. But Jennifer has a 50-50 chance of making it after her surgery. And like, what funny
Oh,
thing...
remember there's a random side character who's like one of Dr. Grant's aides at the aquarium.
Yeah.
Who, for whatever, he's just there for that one episode that we see. And he's just like a big fan of Jennifer.
Yeah. Oh, really? I don't remember.
You don't remember that he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt? He's a little bit scuzzy.
Okay. He loves Jennifer.
But he loves Jennifer. And then when Jonah finally confesses to what happened with Jennifer, he's like, you better hope for your sake that Jennifer's okay.
Oh, yeah. And then later when Jason Priestley like feels really bad about the whole thing, he's like, how's Jennifer? How's Jennifer? Is she gonna make it?
Is Jennifer gonna make it?
Is Jennifer gonna make it?
This is, I mean, maybe it was this role. This like got on his like audition tape that really got him that role in 90210 a few years later.
Yeah, I mean his acting style mostly consists of like doing this thing with his eyebrows where like one goes up really high and he's like, and he looks like perturbed.
Is Jennifer gonna be okay, man?
Yeah.
He's but he's like acting. He's very much a soap opera actor who knows how good looking he is. That's kind of how. I mean, I don't. Is he always like that? It's been so long since I've seen 90210.
I don't really remember.
But that is kind of his Jason Priestley's vibe, and yeah, you're like, oh yeah, he's better looking than everyone on the show.
Yeah, like by a lot.
Yeah.
Like he's kind of he's a movie star looking guy.
Yeah.
And I mean that's the episode where, as I mentioned earlier, they're arguing about Jennifer's well-being and meanwhile pounding out like a piece of beef on the counter.
Yeah, that's true.
You're thinking like, well,
this doesn't. Yeah.
What? Like why?
At times.
Why?
It's true.
Why is? And then the giant salmon on the table too. I think
That's
was
right.
in that episode. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, am I supposed to be like raising an eyebrow here that you're okay with eating this salmon, but not? But like Jennifer must be saved at all costs. I don't know. Anyway.
I know it doesn't really like. It's not a consistent ethical thing. I mean, they're not vegans.
I mean, it's just like
Or
with
even
the chickens. Like the chickens are completely like, who cares that they live in squalor?
Yeah, they show the inside of a chicken barn.
Yeah.
And it's gross.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my god, it's just like crammed full of chickens.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, we
oh.
don't care about the chickens, but for some reason, Jennifer is a different story.
Yeah.
Well,
I've alluded to this a few times in today's episode already, but I really find a class analysis of this show is really rewarding.
all right.
You've heard of the working class hero?
I've heard of him.
James Dean, let's say. It's not something you see that often anymore, to be honest.
No.
Well, I'd say this show has a professional class hero, and it's not just incidental that he's a marine biologist, that he has like a very, I'd say, emblematic professional class kind of job.
Okay.
It's really important to the ethos of the entire show.
And he owns an island and boat, helicopter, plane.
Well, he gets to live him and the kids get to live a rather extravagant life.
Yeah, I mean, they almost die all the time, but yes.
Well, they have access to planes and helicopters and boats, and they do live on an island. Presumably that's because he has a decent salary as a marine biologist. In the 1980s, I suppose a house on the coast of Vancouver didn't cost $8 million.
Well, but when you see the house, it has a pool, and it's like...
It is a rich person's house.
It's a beautiful house.
It is. It's true. He is a rich person, but he's a professional class person. And he didn't inherit his money. He earned it. He earned it by being highly educated, highly competent. I mean, he's a caricature. Highly moral. He's principled. He's moral. He knows everything. Mm-hmm. He's a workaholic. Can't stop working. But at the same time, he's a great dad.
The best.
He makes dinner for his kids and stuff. Mm-hmm. And he brings his kids with him all the time. Now, and it's really interesting, too. So he's a guy who is about knowing what's right, following the rules. He's actually the guy... He would be, in other episodes of the show I don't think we watched together, he's a guy who's making the rules. He's the one who's like doing impact analysis studies so he's, if we're thinking about what are the rules, what are the laws, he's a guy who's making them as an advisor, right? Mm-hmm. And the bad guys are the people who don't follow the rules, whether it's fishermen who fish out of season. It's usually a kind of a working class or a lower class or an underclass kind of figure who is
smuggling animals,
and there's signals that they're poor or dirty anyway. I mean, even
like the sailor with the rabid dog who like doesn't dock where he's supposed to and just like puts his boat wherever.
That's right, and then
doesn't get his dogs shots.
He docks for 3 seconds. He's started a rabies outbreak. Broke the rule. Mm-hmm. The Hicks, who are reckless with guns. So there's an episode we haven't talked about much where there's a mountain lion on the prowl in Danger Bay. Dr. Grant and the kids are like trying to trap the lion so they can bring it somewhere to safety where it won't bother anyone. But there are local yokels with guns and trucks trying to shoot the mountain lion. And they're really the antagonists. It's not the mountain lion.
They're Hicks. And they are
exactly.
up to no good.
And importantly, people of that type, that class, they don't follow the rules and they're not moral. One of the biggest problems, and there's actually occasionally there is a capitalist, a businessman who...
Yes.
will be a bad guy too. Say it's the owner of a real estate developer who's trying to buy a fish plant, and he sabotages the fish plant through mercury poisoning.
Or the oil and gas guy who temporarily doesn't care about the whales.
That's right. He's redeemed a little bit, but a better example of just a straight up bad guy capitalist, big business corporate guy, is this real estate developer, and he, what's the difference between him and Dr. Grant, really? I mean, they're both...
Dr. Roberts.
Sorry,
Dr. Grant
Dr.
Roberts.
Grant Roberts, right. What's the difference? I mean, the difference is that Dr. Roberts, with his status, his money, and his power, is moral. This capitalist guy, he has status, power, money, but he's immoral, and he's selfish. So one of the he's doing things for his own self-interest, his own promotions, his own benefit, his own profit. That's what a capitalist does. That's what an owner of a real estate developer does, right? In the world of the show. The professional class, as it's imagined and pictured here, is someone who doesn't do that, who spends their life, their career, doing what's best for the world, being benevolent, thinking about what's best for the animals, what's best for the environment, what's the best thing for my kids, right? And so that is a defining feature of, I think, the self-conception of the professional class, people who are highly educated and have jobs in government bureaucracies or as experts and as advisors, is that they're operating as good moral actors, and they follow the rules. And so this is a world where if you break the rules, something bad always happens.
The show assumes a lot. And I feel like assumes that kind of the way things generally are is the right way.
It's a state. I mean, this is often the limit of Canadian CanCon because it's funded by the state. So wherever the state is represented, it often is like doing something really
But
good.
it's also the 80s. Like this is also prevalent throughout the media of the 80s where there's a certain, the zeitgeist was just so kind of like upbeat and moralistic at the same time.
Yeah.
And this certain like all you really need to do is be altruistic and follow the rules that are put in place by the right people and don't be selfish and don't do things for reasons of like individual profit in whatever way and that was the message that was like the entire zeitgeist of the 80s. And it's not just the show and it's not just shows funded by the state. Like this was kind of everything.
There
in the
was
80s.
also part of the 80s that is like a stream of neoliberalism, Reaganism, represented I guess by later Trudeau and Mulroney in Canada, which is like the state is bad actually.
That's true. Where the hero had to struggle against the state trying to hold
state's
them
all
back.
maybe it's manned by corrupt bureaucrats.
Or it's just like such a morass of endless bureaucracy that
yeah.
you can't get anything done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was actually a really prominent theme of public discourse,
And so in that narrative, it's the maverick who is the hero and has to like fight against the kind of bland suit-wearing bureaucrat. Yeah, that's
a more American story.
Yeah.
The more Canadian, the Canadian version of Top Gun that appears in Danger Bay is that guy is a criminal. Actually.
Yeah, haha, that's good. Yeah, that is funny.
Naomi, have we said all we can about Danger Bay?
We have not said all we can, but I think we've said all that we must.
We could propose a 27-part series of Danger Bay, or even a 123-part series where we rewatch every episode.
I think it's a good idea.
For the Danger Bay heads out there. I wonder if there really is a fan base for Danger Bay. I mean, just because of, that we've talked about the changing nature of animal ethics. Would put the show in a problematic place in some ways for people, the very people who would have liked it. At the time, right?
So watching anything from the 80s, you kind of that I saw as a child.
Yeah.
Like I realized how infused I was with the 80s zeitgeist, in the way that a child just like that's all you know. You don't know that there's other ways of seeing things, right? This is like the way you've been taught to think, and it's the way you see the world, and it's just the way the world is. And this kind of like perfect father figure, who's Grant Roberts, who's like a perfect father, a perfect, he's a doctor, he loves animals, he always does the right thing. Yeah. He will go to any length to make sure that the right thing is done and that everyone is okay.
Yeah.
And like that was really appealing at the time in a way that was just like, well, that's obviously the best life you could possibly have would be to like have this dad who took you with him on adventures, and the adventures involve saving animals.
Yeah.
And
it's so true. I mean, honestly, you'd want like Dr. Roberts to be your dad.
Oh yeah.
For all of the little niggling critiques or whatever, in the end you're like, this is just a very cool dude.
Yeah.
An awesome dad.
Yeah.
And you'd love him. You'd love to be on the boat with him.
Well, let me say this.
Mm-hmm.
I think Danger Bay like held a special place in many of our hearts in the 80s.
Yep.
And people our age look back at it fondly and feel nostalgia for it. And it's really interesting to go back and watch it again and actually see how like it doesn't quite fit anymore into our world and the way that we see the world.
It's true, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And it's really fun. It was fun to watch it with that historical lens on it, but you couldn't, there's no way people are going to show this to their kids now.
No, you can't. You can't.
You couldn't. It just wouldn't work. But I'm glad that we had a chance and the excuse to do it and to bring our findings back to you, the audience. Thanks, Naomi, for watching Danger Bay with me.
It was a pleasure.
And talking about it with me today. And thanks, everybody out there watching. Take care and wear your life jackets.